I finally decided to make a basic bodice pattern with that. You all know at the beginning of the year I made a dartless bodice pattern. I would have easily used that to make this pattern, just to add the dart, but I decided to do the whole process with you all from scratch. So here are the measurements we need to note down. First our neck circumference, then our shoulder width, then our armhole circumference, then our bust circumference. Then we need our shoulder to waist, our waist to hip, our waist circumference, our hip circumference, and our bust span. Bust span is the same as nipple to nipple. Let us start drafting this pattern. Here is my pattern paper. I already drew my vertical and horizontal lines, which will serve as my shoulder line and my center front. So let us start. On the horizontal line, which is my shoulder line, I am going to mark my neck circumference divided by 5. I am going to mark both at the top. I am going to come down a bit and I am going to straighten that line. Now that I have gotten my width, I am going to mark my length. So my length, I am going to mark my neck circumference divided by 5 plus 0.5 inches. So for me that is 3 inches. Okay, so the width of my neckline is about 2.5 and my depth is, my length rather, is 3 inches. So now I am going to mark my shoulder width divided by 2. Now that that is done, on that new line, I am going to go ahead and mark my shoulder width divided by 10. And I am going to connect that new mark to my neckline. Now from the point we connected to the neckline right there, I am going to go ahead and mark my armhole circumference divided by 2. After you've marked that divided by 2, you are also going to mark the middle of that point. Okay, so from the point down, that is our shoulder slope actually, to our armhole circumference, we are going to divide it by 2 and we are going to find the midpoint like so. So from that midpoint right there, I am going to go inwards by 1 inch. So 1 inch right there, and that's that for that. So now on that point, on that line where we have our armhole circumference right there, I am going to mark my bust circumference divided by 4. So we are marking our bust circumference divided by 4 plus 0.5 inch for ease. So right there is my bust circumference divided by 4. I am going to rule that line into a horizontal line. Now after that is done, it is time for us to draw our armhole curve. So now I am going to bring my curved ruler and I am going to find the best curve that coordinates with all the points that I have got, and I am going to draw my armhole curve. So our curve is starting from our bust circumference right there to the 1 inch we mark inwards at the armhole circumference line and to our shoulder slope. I hope you understand. This is my curve. After marking my curve from my armhole, I am going to go ahead and mark my curve for my neckline. Please do not forget to show me some love by liking this video and subscribing to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. And guys, thank you for 1,000 plus subscribers. Now that that is done, I am going to mark my shoulder to waist measurement from the shoulder line. I am going to mark my shoulder to waist measurement and I am going to draw that into a horizontal line like we did to our bust line. Now from the waistline we just drew, I am going to mark my waist to hip measurements. So my waist to hip measurement I am going to mark and I am going to draw that into a horizontal line. So now we have our bust line, our waistline, and our hip line horizontally marked. So now on my waistline, I am going to mark my waist circumference divided by 4 plus 0.5 inches for ease and 1.5 inches for that. So that is my 1.5 inch right there for that. That is what today's video is all about. We are adding that to our bodice at last. So now I am going to go down to my hip line and I am going to mark my hip circumference divided by 4 plus 0.5 inches for ease. We are not adding that to the hip, guys. Hip circumference divided by 4 plus 0.5 inches for ease. So now what I am going to do is that I am going to use my pencil to connect the lines. So I am going to connect from my armhole right there down to my waist and to my hip. I am using my pencil right now because I am going to later use my curved ruler to smoothen the curve out. I don't know if you guys can see the pencil mark, but it is there. Now that I am done with that, on my bust line, I am going to mark my bust span divided by 2. So the bust span is the same thing as your nipple to nipple measurement. I am going to mark it on my bust line, on my waistline, and on my hip line. After I am done marking, I am going to connect all the lines with a straight ruler. So I am going to have a straight line going down the middle of my bodice. Now that that's done, on that new line that we have, I am going to go down by 2 inches like so. So on that middle line that we have, I am going to go down by 2 inches. And on my waistline, I am going to mark my dart. Remember, I added 1.5 inches extra for my dart. So on each side, I am going to have 0.75 inches each to make 1.5 inch. And now I am going to connect from that 2 inches line down to my dart and down to my hip. I am using a pencil now because I am going to use my marker to smoothen out everything with a curved ruler. Now from my hip line, I am going to go down by 1 inch. That is our M. So I'm going to go down by 1 inch. I am using my pencil to mark because I am going to use my marker later. So I'm going to mark a straight line but not all the way to the end, okay, because we want the side to be curved and the center is going to be straight. So I'm going to take my curved ruler like so, and I am going to look for the appropriate curve. Okay, so I'm going to look for the appropriate curve and I am going to curve like so, not all the way to the end, like to the middle of the bodice, and I am going to use the straight line to continue the rest. Okay, so this is what we have right here. This is what it is looking like. The next thing I am going to do now is to smoothen out all my curve. So I'm going to smoothen out the curve on my dart, both sides of my dart, and also for my side seam. Okay, so that is what we are going to do. Just want to look for the appropriate curve. And guys, I want you to know that your bodies may look different from mine. We all have different body types. So your waist to hip length may not be the same as mine. Your hip circumference may not be the same as mine. So if your bodice is not looking like mine, it is fine. So don't freak out if your bodice is not looking like mine, okay? We all have different shapes, different measurements, and different sizes, okay? So now at the side seam, you just want to look for the appropriate curve on your ruler that is good to smoothen out your side seams, okay? So that is it for my front bodice. It is done. Now I am going to work on my back bodice. So I am going to extend the lines, my hip line, my waistline, and my shoulder line, so that I don't have to start drawing lines all over again. So now that I am done, I am going to mark my starting point vertically, which is going to be my center back, since we already have our horizontal lines placed. From my center back, I am going to mark my neck circumference divided by 5, and I am going to go down by 1 inch. So I am simply marking my width and my neck depth. I am going to draw that into a rectangle so that we have our neckline in place. Now from the center back again, I am going to mark my shoulder width divided by 2. and I am going to draw that down into a vertical line like we did to the front bodice. Now on that new line, I am going to mark my shoulder width divided by 10, and I am going to connect it to the neckline that we just drew. Now from the shoulder slope, I am going to mark my armhole circumference divided by 2, and I am going to mark the midpoint. We are just repeating everything we did to the front bodice, okay? So now that I have marked the midpoint, I am going to go in. Right there, I am going to go in by 0.5 inches. So I am going in by half an inch. Now at the end of our armhole line, I am going to mark my bust circumference divided by 4. We are not adding ease, and I am going to rule that line. So after that is done, I am going to bring out my curved ruler, and I am going to make my armhole curve. So you will notice that the back body's curve is smaller than that of the front. That is how it is supposed to be. The curve for the back and the front is not supposed to be the same. And also do not forget to curve your neckline after you're done curving your armhole. Now on my waistline, I am going to mark my waist circumference divided by 4 plus 1 inch for that. Okay, so I am marking my 1 inch for that. After that is done, I am going to mark my midpoint at my waist. So I am simply looking for my midpoint at my waist. And I am going to go down to the hip line, and I am also going to mark that midpoint. Okay. So what I am doing now is that I am simply marking my that point immediately. So that is half an inch on both sides, right? So now I am going to mark that midpoint on my waist, on my hip rather, and I am also going to mark my hip circumference divided by 4 from my center front. Now I am going to bring out my pencil, and I am going to connect my side seams from the hip line to my waist to my armhole. Okay, and I am also going to connect my dots. To connect my dots, I am going to mark the center line like so, and from the top of the center line, from the bust line, I am going to mark 1 inch downwards like so, and I am going to connect my dot to that line. Now that that's done, it's time for me to smoothen my darts and my side seams. So look for the appropriate curve and smoothen your straight lines. So at the M line, I am going to go down by half an inch, which is 0.5 inch, and I am going to use my ruler to mark a straight line. We are not getting all the way to the end, just about where the middle is. Then I am going to use my curved ruler to do the rest. That is it for my front and back bodies. Now let us move over to the sleeve pattern. So I already marked my starting points. The horizontal line is my shoulder line, while the vertical line is in the middle. That would be the middle of my sleeve. Okay, so from the shoulder line, the horizontal line, I am going to go down on the middle line, and I am going to mark my bust circumference divided by 10 plus 1.2 inches. So I'm going to go down and I am going to square it out with my ruler, and now we have another straight horizontal line to work with. After that is done, what I am going to do now is to go back to my front and back bodies, and I'm going to look for the measurement. So the length of my front and back bodies, I am going to add that together. So note that down now. So from the point where the middle line and the first horizontal line meet, I am going to mark my front and back armhole. So my front and back added together divided by 2 minus 0.2 inches. Okay, so you are going to plus your back and front armhole divided by 2 and minus 0.2 inches. Now I am going to divide that into 3 almost equal parts. So they are not equal. I'm just using my fingers. Now on the shoulder line, I am going to go out by 1 inch. I'm going to go out on one part of the trees by 1 inch, and the other part, the last part, by about 0.2 inches. Okay, so after that is done, I am going to try as much as possible to freehand the curve. So first off, I am using my pencil. I was very skeptical about this part, but I was able to at least do something. So I went in with my pencil, and now I am using my marker. At this point, my hands were shaking like, Juliet, what are you doing? Do you want some for all now? Just do one straight stroke, you know, instead of shading and painting with the marker. But this is what I have got. To me, I feel like it is good enough, right? So after that is done, I am just going to use a random sleeve length and sleeve circumference. So I'm just going to draw the line like so. That is my sleeve length, and my sleeve circumference like so, or my arm circumference rather, like so. So after that is done, I am going to cut that part out, and I am going to fold it into 2 like so. Okay, so I am going to fold it like so. After folding, then I am going to cut out my sleeve pattern. Now that that is out of the way, I am going to mark my front armhole. So the front is supposed to be like half an inch, so like 0.5 inches smaller than that of the front. So I am going to draw it like so, and I am going to use my scissors to cut it out. So now we have our front and our back armhole curve. After that is done, guys, we have finished drafting our patterns. Now I decided to make this pattern because I intend to use it for a double-breasted blazer jacket that is going to be fitted. You all know that I made an oversized blazer jacket with a basic bodice pattern without that, but I'm making this one now because I want to make another blazer jacket that is going to be fitted and is going to have that. See you in that video. Do not forget to like and subscribe.